Hi everybody, I'm Fab Fante, and you're watching Fante's Inferno, the circle for fans of film and comic books. In this episode, we're going to revisit the time that Jon Sable was contracted for a freelance job by a certain Washington, D.C. resident that had acted with a chimp. I'm talking about Mike Grell's Jon Sable Freelance #1, published by First Comics. Let's take a look. As a comic book collector, the early to mid-'80s was my age of independence. Independent comic books, that is. Growing up on a steady diet of Marvel and DC comics purchased from our local corner store made me a fan of the superhero and war genres. But it was the independent publishers like Pacific Comics and Aardvark Vanaheim that introduced me to the non-powered characters like Gru the Wanderer and Cerebus the Aardvark. But it was Mike Grell's gun-toting freelance Jon Sable that drove me to visit my first dedicated comic book shop every single month just to find his comic book. I was first introduced to Mike Grell's work in the DC comic book Warlord back in the 70s, but in contrast to the sword-wielding character in Warlord, Mike Grell's creator-owned character Jon Sable was a private investigator, a bounty hunter, and mercenary living in New York City who took freelance jobs that usually fell outside of the law. Mike Grell's cover to Jon Sable Freelance #1 gives off a James Bondish vibe, and the first issue has a level of political intrigue. But going forward in this series, you quickly find out that there's more to Jon Sable. Jon Sable Freelance #1 hit the spinner racks on February 19th, 1983. The story begins as any story about a freelance bounty hunter and hired gun should begin, with an interview of a popular and beloved children's book author. B.B. Flem, Jon Sable's alter ego, brings in millions of dollars writing children's books about leprechauns living in Central Park. As he walks home from his televised interview, the nightly news fills us in on President Reagan's upcoming visit to the UN. With security naturally heightened for his visit, Police Captain Winters makes it clear that the NYPD is prepared for the task, and private entities like professional bounty hunter Jon Sable are not needed or welcome in his city. Upon his return home, Sable takes off his phlegm wig, mustache, and glasses and hones his shooting skills in his computerized basement shooting range. The security system alerts him to an unauthorized entry, and he quickly shows the three invaders why it's a mistake to break into his home. Being the sociable type, Sable takes a walk to their boss's car only to find out it's President Reagan himself. The president tells him of the threat of an assassination attempt at his upcoming speech at the United Nations and wants Sable to take out the hitman before he strikes. Sable is not interested, but he's put in a corner when the Gipper threatens to expose his gun-for-hire identity, which would both ruin his million-dollar career as an author and put his life in danger. But Sable's interest peaks when he hears the hitman is his old colleague Milo Jackson. He accepts the job, but instead of a cash payment, he wants both carte blanche and a yet-to-be-named favor upon completion. Jon Sable and Milo Jackson's connection started out as teammates on the 1972 Olympic shooting team. By 1979, they were mercenaries in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, but their friendship was torn apart when the opportunistic Jackson betrayed his comrades in arms and disappeared. His trip to the past is broken by a call from his agent Eden Kendall, who has an interest in Sable that goes beyond having him as a successful client. But unfortunately, Jon Sable business trumps B.B. Flem business, and the mood is broken. That night, Sable visits a local hangout for mercenaries and guns for hire to get information on Milo's activities. But as Phil the bartender fills him in, they're rudely interrupted by a group of toughs that quickly find out that Jon Sable's reputation is rightfully earned. Sable heads over to Mad Maxie's gun shop only to be knocked out by Jackson. He comes to, and Maxie speaks the words Iron Monster with his dying breath. Sable calls Captain Winters and asks him to cancel the UN speech. But instead of working the tip, Winters arrests Sable on a gun charge. Sable tosses Winters his get-out-of-jail-free card, but isn't released until almost 12 hours later. Sable scopes out the location for the president's speech, which has been vandalized and undergoing a quick cleanup with less than 2 hours to go. But a closely grouped set of bullet holes tell Sable that Jackson took a practice run with the Iron Monster rifle he stole from Mad Maxie's. With 1 hour to go, Sable and one of the president's men sweep the hotel room Jackson had occupied that overlooks the UN Plaza,
But the room not having a clear line of sight to the podium leads Sable to question what Jackson's angle is for the hit. He quickly realizes Jackson has taken an angle from a nearby construction site. As the final 15 minutes count down to the president's speech, Sable makes his way to the building site, avoiding the trap that Jackson set for him. As Jackson sets his aim and adjusts for wind drift, Sable drops a steel girder that narrowly misses him. With Jackson at the other end of the gun barrel, Sable, in his signature battle mask, asks Jackson why he would do this. Jackson tells him it was simply for the money, before setting off one last trap for Sable. But Jackson lets Sable live just to have him see his handiwork. Before Jackson can get his shot off, Sable pulls 2 blades from his belt buckle and takes out Jackson just as he squeezes the trigger to the iron monster. The bullet narrowly misses the president, but takes out an unfortunate dove instead. The story ends abruptly with a 3-panel epilogue in which Sable sneaks into CIA headquarters to wipe his record clean. But before we can question if he's actually that good to sneak into the CIA records room, the final panel reveals him giving the commander-in-chief the key he borrowed. The president lives, and Jon Sable no longer has to look over his shoulder. Overall, Jon Sable Freelance #1 is a solid introduction to the character of Jon Sable, with great art and an intrigue-filled story by Mike Grell. My one caveat is for a story of 28 pages, the plot is at the expense of character development, with only 1 or 2 pages to introduce the supporting characters and 2 pages for Jon Sable's backstory. But Grell makes up for this in subsequent issues with a deeper dive into Jon Sable's origin, including his time in Africa. Jon Sable Freelance is a powerful comic book that's equal parts character and plot-driven. Mike Grell's script and artwork are engaging, and the characters, drama, and locations bring the readers back each month. I have to admit there was a part of me that was disappointed whenever Jon Sable didn't wear his signature battle mask, but looking back I realized that it's a testament to the fact that his character doesn't need the traditional hero elements that were prevalent in comic books at the time. The first comics run lasted 56 issues from 1983 to 1988, and a live-action TV series was developed by ABC in 1987, starring Louis Van Bergen as Jon Sable and Rene Russo as Eden Kendall. The series only lasted 7 episodes, but can be found on YouTube. 5 volumes of the Jon Sable Omnibus can be found on Amazon, and individual issues can be found on eBay for less than $5 each. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please hit the like button, leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell for notifications, and check out my website, fantesinferno.com, where you'll find other reviews and interviews from previous years. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the Inferno.